Chapter 35. 2000 Year of Persecution of the Chosen People of God. There are no people in the entire world who have been persecuted, hated, abused, tortured, and killed to the same degree as the Jews. The German Nazi Holocaust was just a small drop in an ocean of 2000 years of continuous long-suffering and unjustifiable persecution. As we speak, the Jews are surrounded by 200 million Arab haters who want them completely annihilated. In addition to this inner circle of haters, there is an outer circle of over a billion haters. Who are the Muslims of the world? The Iranian scientists are working day and night to produce a nuclear bomb in order to wipe Israel from the map of the world. 1.2 billion Muslims hate the Jews and wish to see all of them exterminated. Each and every Muslim prays 5 times a day, and he must call 17 times in his prayers, the Jews. The accursed people on whom the wrath of God abides forever. See the Quran, in Surah Al-Fatiha 1, verse 7. Today, many of the so-called Arab Palestinians hate the Jews and call them the serpent people, Satan worshippers, and brothers of apes and pigs. They count them as fake and impostors who have nothing to do with the children of Israel of the Bible and deny their right to live in their God-given promised land. In order to examine this claim, let us state briefly the history of the Jews and find out what had happened to them after the destruction of their temple by the Romans in the year 70 AD. Under the Roman military commander Titus Vespasian, the Roman army attacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. They destroyed the temple, massacred the entire population, ransacked the city, and made it desolate. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus reported that after the destruction of the temple, the Romans under the leadership of the military commander Titus killed 1,300,000 Jews. They destroyed 128 Jewish synagogues in Jerusalem and 180 synagogues in Judea and Samaria. Then the Roman soldiers took 97,000 Jews as prisoners, of whom many ended up in the slave markets in Europe. Johannes ben Zakkai fled with many Jews towards the Mediterranean Sea and settled not far from Jerusalem, where he created a new form of Judaism in which he abolished the animal sacrifices and dedicated their time to the study of the Torah. The menorah became in the place of the temple. In Gamla at the Golan Heights, today the border between Israel and Syria, some Jews settled there and established the first Jewish synagogue. Many other survivors fled to the vicinity of the Dead Sea and hid in the well-known fortress of Masada, which was formerly created by King Herod. The Romans sent an army that laid siege to the fortress for 3 whole years. Then the Romans used the Jewish prisoners to build a huge ladder. According to the historian Josephus, over 1,000 Jews preferred to kill themselves rather than to surrender and become slaves to the Romans. First, every man killed his wife, sons, daughters, and other relatives. Then, every man killed another man until the last man took his life. Masada became the symbol of Jewish perseverance. Today, the Israeli soldiers swear allegiance that Masada must never be allowed to fall again. In 132 AD, a Jew by the name of Simeon bar Kochba, which means the son of a star, led a 3-year revolt against the Roman Empire. 500,000 Jews were killed by the Romans. Thousands were sold into slavery and many went into captivity. Judaism was no longer recognized as a legal religion in the Roman Empire. In 135 AD, the Roman Emperor, Aelia Hadrian, put down the last resistance of the Jews to the Roman Empire. He then destroyed the entire city of Jerusalem, and rebuilt a new city that he renamed after himself, Aelia Capitolina. A pagan temple for the Roman god Jupiter was erected on the mountain temple. Another temple for Venus was built on Golgotha, just outside the city. Emperor Hadrian knew that the bitter enemies of the Jews were the Philistines, the former inhabitants of the southern region of the Kingdom of Judah. Therefore, he changed the name of the entire country to Syria Palestina, which retains its name until the present time. Many people think that Palestine was the original name of the country, which was given to it by the so-called Arab Palestinians. Those Arabs did not become inhabitants of that country until the 7th century, when the Arab Muslim Mujahideen came from Arabia and invaded it in 636. The Philistines of South Judea were not Arabs but white Europeans who immigrated from the Crete island in Greece. Today, they are an extinct race. Unfortunately, in the 19th century, due to the growing anti-Semitism in Europe, the descendants of those Arab invaders were erroneously named Palestinians after the ancient Philistines. As we mentioned, those original Philistines ceased to exist hundreds of years before the Muslim Arabs came from Arabia and invaded Palestine in the 7th century AD. So, it is wrong to call the Arabs who occupied the Jewish Promised Land the Palestinians. They were supposed to be called the descendants of the Arab invaders who came from Arabia and stole the Jewish land. The Patriarch of Jerusalem handed the keys of the city to the second Muslim caliph, Omar ibn al-Khattab, in the year 636. From that time, the Muslim invaders occupied Palestine until the European Crusaders kicked him out in the year 1099. After he put an end to the Jewish revolt, Emperor Hadrian forbade their presence in that region. He issued a decree which stated that any Jew to be found in Aelia Capitolina or in any place in the entire region of Palestina should be put to death. In consequence of that, began the mass migration of the Jews out of their homeland, and as the Bible prophesied, God scattered them all over the world. They went everywhere in the known world where there were communities of people. The Roman historian Eustabra said there was no city on earth that those people were not found. Some of them stayed in the northern Palestine region, which was known as Galilee, closer to their homeland. By the 2nd century, 2 million Jews became refugees in Babylonia, Iraq today. The rest of the Jews were scattered throughout the Roman Empire. In 200 AD, the Roman Emperor Severus forbade religious conversions to Judaism. In the 3rd century, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, who converted to Christianity in the year 312, made it the state religion. He had outlawed Judaism and cut the ears of the Jews and dispersed them as vagabonds. During the 5th and 6th centuries, the Jews were forbidden to hold any public office. In 528, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian passed the Justinian Code. It prohibited Jews from building synagogues, reading the Bible in Hebrew, assembling in public, celebrating their Passover before the Christian Easter, or the resurrection of Christ, and testifying against Christians in court. In 613, very severe persecution against the Jews began in Spain. Jews were given the two options of converting to Christianity or leaving the country. Jewish children over the age of 6 were taken from their parents and given to Christian families to educate and raise them up as Christians. In 722 AD, Leo III outlawed Judaism and many Jews were baptized against their will. In 855 AD, Jews were exiled out of Italy. A great many church fathers and bishops openly condemned the Jews and called for the destruction of their synagogues. Saint Augustine, who was the greatest theologian of all time and one counted among the 3 great scholars of the Church, with Saint Ambrose and Saint Jerome, wrote in 415 AD. The true image of the Hebrew man is Judas Iscariot. Who sold the Lord for silver? The Jew can never understand the Scriptures and forever will bear the guilt for the death of Jesus. Saint Jerome, who created the Latin Vulgate translation of the Bible, in 418 AD, wrote of the Jewish synagogue, "If you call it a brothel, a den of vice, the devil's refuge, Satan's fortress, a place to deprave the soul, an abyss of disaster or whatever you will, you are still saying less than it deserved." John Chrysostom said, "The Jewish synagogue is worse than a brothel. It is the den of scoundrels and the rearing of wild beasts, the temple of demons devoted to idolatrous cults, the refuge of brigands and debauchees, and the cavern of devils. It is a criminal assembly of Jews, a place of meeting for the assassins of Christ, a place worse than a drinking tavern, a den of thieves, a place of ill fame, a dwelling of iniquity, the refuge of devils, a deep gulf and an abyss of perdition." I would say the same things about their souls. As for me, I hate the Jewish synagogue, I hate the Jews for the same reason. Peter the Venerable wrote, "Yes, you Jews. I say, do I address you? You, who till this very day, deny the Son of God. How long, poor wretches, will ye not believe the truth? Truly I am doubting whether a Jew can be really human. I lead out from its den a monstrous animal and show it is a laughingstock in the amphitheatre of the world, in the sight of all the people. I bring thee forward, thou Jew, thou brute beast, in the sight of all men." Saint Hilary of Poitiers referred to the Jews as a perverse people who God has cursed forever. Saint Ephrem referred to the Jewish synagogues as brothels. In 380 AD, the Bishop of Milan was responsible for the burning of a synagogue. He referred to it as an act pleasing to God. In 538 AD, the Third and Fourth Councils of Orleans prohibited Jews from appearing in public during the Easter season. Canon 30 decreed that, from Thursday before Easter, for 4 days, Jews may not appear in the company of Christians. Marriages between Christians and Jews were prohibited. Christians were prohibited from converting to Judaism. Canon 24 of the Third Lateran Council stated, Jews should be slaves to Christians, and Canon 26 stated that, the testimony of Christians against Jews is to be preferred in all cases. Saint Chrysostom, Origen, Jerome, and other church fathers believed that God punished the Jews with perpetual slavery for their alleged responsibility for the execution of Jesus Christ. Perhaps no one showed so much hatred to the Jews as the founder of the Reformation, Martin Luther. In his infamous little book, On the Jews and Their Lies, which he wrote in the year 1543, Martin Luther made the following advice to all kings and rulers of Europe. "What then shall we Christians do with this damned, rejected race of Jews? Since they live among us and we know about their lying and blasphemy and cursing, we cannot tolerate them if we do not wish to share in their lies, cursing, and blaspheming. In this way, we cannot quench the inextinguishable fire of divine rage nor convert the Jews. We must prayerfully and reverentially practice a merciful severity. Perhaps we may save a few from the fire and flames of hell. We must not seek vengeance. They are surely being punished 1,000 times more than we might wish them. Let me give you my honest advice. First, their synagogues should be set on fire. And whatever does not burn up should be covered or spread over with dirt so that no one may ever be able to see a cinder or stone of it. And this ought to be done for the honor of God and of Christianity, in order that God may see that we are Christians and that we have not wittingly tolerated or approved of such public lying, cursing, and blaspheming of his Son and his Christians. Secondly, their homes should likewise be broken down and destroyed. For they perpetrate the same things there that they do in their synagogues. For this reason, they ought to be put under one roof or in a stable, like gypsies, in order that they may realize that they are not masters in our land, as they boast, but miserable captives. As they complain of incessantly before God with bitter wailing. Thirdly, they should be deprived of their prayer books and Talmuds in which such idolatry, lies, cursing, and blasphemy are taught. Fourth, their rabbis must be forbidden under threat of death to teach any more. Fifth, passport and traveling privileges should be absolutely forbidden to the Jews. For they have no business in the rural districts since they are not nobles, nor officials, nor merchants, nor the like. Let them stay at home. If you princes and nobles do not close the road legally to such exploiters, then some troop ought to ride against them. For they will learn from this pamphlet what the Jews are and how to handle them, and that they ought not to be protected. You ought not. You cannot protect them unless in the eyes of God you want to share all their abomination. To sum up, dear princes and nobles who have Jews in your domains, if this advice of mine does not suit you, then find a better one so that you and we may all be free of this insufferable devilish burden, the Jews. Let the government deal with them in this respect, as I have suggested. But whether the government acts or not, let everyone at least be guided by his own conscience and form for himself a definition or image of a Jew. When you lay eyes on or think of a Jew, you must say to yourself, "Alas, that mouth which I there behold has cursed and execrated and maligned every Saturday my dear Lord Jesus Christ, who has redeemed me with his precious blood." In addition, it prayed and pleaded before God that I, my wife and children, and all Christians might be stabbed to death and perish miserably. And he himself would gladly do this if he were able, in order to appropriate our goods. Such a desperate, thoroughly evil, poisonous, and devilish lot are these Jews, who for these 1400 years have been and still are our plague, our pestilence, and our misfortune. Martin Luther continued to write, "I have read and heard many stories about the Jews which agree with this judgment of Christ, namely, how they have poisoned wells, made assassinations, kidnapped children, as related before. I have heard that one Jew sent another Jew, and this by means of a Christian, a pot of blood, together with a barrel of wine, in which when drunk empty, a dead Jew was found. There are many other similar stories. For their kidnapping of children, they have often been burned at the stake or banished, as we already heard. I am well aware that they deny all of this. However, it all coincides with the judgment of Christ, which declares that they are venomous, bitter, vindictive, tricky serpents, assassins, and children of the devil, who sting and work harm stealthily wherever they cannot do it openly. For this reason, I would like to see them where there are no Christians. The Turks and other heathens do not tolerate what we Christians endure from these venomous serpents and young devils. Next to the devil, a Christian has no more bitter and galling foe than a Jew. There is no other to whom we accord as many benefactions and from whom we suffer as much as we do from these base children of the devil, this brood of vipers." Quoted from On the Jews and Their Lies. Luther's Works, Volume 47, translated by Martin H. Bertram, Philadelphia, Fortress Press, 1971. Such unprecedented anti-Semitism by the leading Roman Catholic Church Fathers and the founder of the Protestant Reformation led to many persecutions and mass genocides of the Jews of Europe throughout the centuries, which reached its ugliest form during the Holocaust, at which Adolf Hitler and his collaborators murdered 6 million innocent Jewish men, women, and children. In the 7th century, the Jews of North Africa, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and Morocco were killed if they refused to accept Islam. At one time, some 60,000 Jews were sold as slaves. During the Middle Ages, the Jews were forced to wear the badges of shame, yellow, red, or blue. They were confined to ghettos. Germany considered the Jews to be the slaves of the emperor. They were excluded from the rising number of schools and universities. In the 11th century, England banished them from the country. When the First Crusade began in the 11th century, the cry among the Crusaders was, "Kill the Jew and save your soul." Large numbers of Jews were challenged as Christ killers, embrace the cross or die. 12,000 Jews in the Rhine Valley alone were killed in the First Crusade. This behavior toward the Jews continued for 8 additional crusades until the Ninth Crusade in 1272. When they took Jerusalem in 1099, the Crusaders forced all the Jews into a large central synagogue and set it on fire. Those who tried to escape were forced back into the burning building. In 1146, the Second Crusade began. The French monk Rudolph called for the destruction of the Jews. In 1180, the French king Philips Augustus arbitrarily seized all Jewish property and expelled all of them out of France. In 1189, Jews were persecuted in England. The Crown claimed all Jewish possessions. Most of their houses were burned. In the 12th century, general persecutions swept throughout Europe, and hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed. In the 13th century, the Black Plague, also called the bubonic plague or Black Death, swept Europe, and the Jews were accused of poisoning the wells of the Christians. Rumors spread that the Jews were not dying of the plague because the devil was protecting them, and they were paying him back by poisoning the wells of the Christians. As a result, 1/2 of the Jews in Europe were murdered. In the 14th century, they were banished from France. As they fled France, the Portuguese refused them entry. In the 15th century, Spain forced 800,000 Jews into the sea, most of them drowning or falling dead due to the exposure to the raging waves of the Mediterranean Sea. In 1411, the Spanish Inquisition began, and tens of thousands of Jews were killed. A great many of them fled to Russia. Over 5 million Jews were relocated to Russia. By 1881, Alexander III, the head of the Russian Church, stated a Jew public policy stating that 1/3 of the Jews had to die, 1/3 had to join the Church as Christians, and the last 1/3 has to emigrate. Between 1880 and World War I, the Jewish pogrom began. The pogrom is an organized sanctioned program of political persecution. It was an open season upon a particular people. Everyone has the right to persecute and kill them. Ukraine alone had 12,000 pogroms against the Jews. By the end of 1940s of the World War II, 6 out of every 10 Jews were killed. Kristallnacht or the Night of the Broken Glass was the night throughout Nazi Germany and Austria of the 9th to the 10th of November 1939. In which the shards of broken glass littered the streets when all Jewish-owned stores, buildings, houses, and synagogues had their windows smashed. 6 million Jews were killed by the German Nazi regime, under the command of Adolf Hitler and his collaborators in the Holocaust. Holocaust in Greek means wholly burnt or a sacrifice by fire to a god in which the whole animal is completely burnt. In Hebrew, the Holocaust is come to be known as Shoah, which means calamity or catastrophe. From the year 70 to 1947, Palestine was ruled by 40 different nations. After the Jewish went into diaspora, the Christians occupied their land until the Muslims came and conquered them in the 7th century and took it from them. Then, in the 11th century, the Crusaders defeated the Muslims and occupied the land for 2 centuries until Muslims recaptured it and expelled them out. In 1948, the Promised Land went back to the chosen nation, the Jews. What happened to the Jews during those 2,000 years of wandering among other nations? They were treated as beggars and parasites and scorned, hated, mocked, and killed by everyone. They were enslaved and killed. In every continent, country, and city their blood was spilled. They became a nation of ghosts. Their total destruction was sought by many, with their children taken from them and converted to Christianity or Islam. Many times, they were forced by Christians as well as Muslims to choose between religion or face death. The Church fabricated a false doctrine called replacement theology and claimed to have replaced Israel, with the Christians being the new Israelites. The Jews were considered a rejected and cursed people. They were called Christ killers, and everywhere they went they were tortured and killed. During the evil Nazi Holocaust, the Church turned a blind eye. When the Jews finally decided to return to their homeland, the Pope of Rome stood strongly against their return to Palestine. He argued that, if at all a Hebrew home is to be created, it should be created in any land except Palestine. The Pope's stand against the Jews was not different from the decision of Sultan Abdul Hamid II of the Ottoman Empire, who agreed for the Jews to settle everywhere in his empire except Palestine. According to the replacement theology of the Roman Catholic Church, which was inherited by many Protestant churches, that after the destruction of Jerusalem, by the pagan Roman soldiers in 70 AD, in which 1,300,000 Jews were killed and 97,000 Jews were taken slaves, the Jews would be led away to be slaves among all the nations, and that they would remain in the diaspora until the end of the world. The Jews should not be permitted to return to Palestine with sovereignty. According to the sacred scriptures, the Jewish people must always live dispersed and vagrant, wandering, among the other nations, so that they may render witness to Christ not only by the scriptures, but by their very existence. Quoting Kurtzer David, 2001, Civilta Catholica, 1922, IV, pages 369 to 371, cited in Unholy War. London, Pan Books, page 273. In 1922, the Catholic periodical journal Civilta Catholica justified Catholic antisemitism as a natural response to the Jews' arrogance for refusing to believe in Christ. Antisemitism is nothing but the absolutely necessary and natural reaction to the Jews' arrogance. Catholic antisemitism, while never going beyond the moral law, adopts all necessary means to emancipate the Christian people from the abuse they suffer from their sworn enemy, the Jewish people. Same reference on page 273. Some international figures believed that the Promised Land belongs to the Arabs, and some believe it belongs to the Jews. In 1938, the father of the Indian nation, Mahatma Gandhi, wrote, "Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belongs to the English or France to the French. It is wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews on the Arabs. Surely it would be a crime against humanity to reduce the proud Arabs so that Palestine can be restored to the Jews partly or wholly as their national home." Quoting William R. Slomanson. Fundamental Perspectives on International Law, page 50. Martin Luther King, the leader of the 1960s African American civil rights movement, was a strong supporter of Israel. King paid frequent tribute to Jewish support for black rights, defended Israel's right to exist, supported the Jewish state, while calling for a negotiated settlement in keeping with his advocacy of nonviolence, and on more than one occasion opposed the anti-Zionism by then it was taking increasing hold in the Black Power movement. King said, "Anti-Zionist is inherently anti-Semitic. And ever will be so, Referring to Sundquist, Eric J. 2005. Strangers in the Land, Blacks, Jews, Post-Holocaust America. Cambridge, Harvard University Press, page 110. In general, the Jews are the most hated people in the world. Jesus says to his disciples, "If the world hates you, ye know that it hated me before it hated you. If ye were of the world, the world would love his own. But because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you." Gospel of John chapter 15, verses 18 to 19. The long-lasting world's hatred of the Jews, anti-Semitism, proves the undeniable divine maxim that they are hated because they are the chosen people. Therefore, anti-Semitism is from the devil. A true Christian should always love the Jews and support their right to return to their homeland in the Middle East. The Jews are the most gifted people in the world. They are accomplished people in the arts, business, philosophy, education, finance, science, etc. God gave them the land of Israel as an everlasting inheritance, made them into a great nation, and promising to bless those who bless them and to curse those cursing them. See Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. No other nation has been chosen by God except Israel. No other people have become the custodians of God's truth and oracles, the Holy Bible, except the Jews. No other nation has offered a book, the Bible, to mankind that is verifiable through science, through reason, through history, through morality, and through prophecy except the nation of the Jews. No other nation offered the human race with a Bible, prophets, and Messiah who died for the sin of the world except the nation of Israel. The Bible said salvation is of the Jews. Gospel of John chapter 4. Verse 22. Many nations are jealous of the nation of Israel and many more want to destroy it. To hate the Jews is equal to hate God. It is spiritual suicide to hate Israel. The Bible said all those who hate Zion, Israel, are going to face defeat, disgrace, destruction, and being removed from the blessing of God. Psalm chapter 129, verse 5. A true Christian is a Gentile saved by Jesus and converted over to Orthodox Judaism. A Jew converted to true Christianity is a complete Jew. A true Christian is the one who says to the Jew as Ruth said to Naomi, "Your people will be my people and your God my God." The Book of Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. A convert to Christianity is a convert to Orthodox Judaism. Anti-Semitism within the Church is a theology of abomination. Also, replacement theology is the theology of abomination. Simply put, Christianity is Jewish. The Jews had been kicked out of their promised land 3 times, returning time and again. They are the only people in the entire world who have remained without a country for 20 centuries. And all of a sudden, God gathered them from all over the world and brought them back to their promised land. God promised them a land of everlasting inheritance. Many mighty nations occupied that land had been uprooted by God and kicked out of it. No nation has the right to claim that land except the Jews. The Arab Palestinians claim ownership, but neither their Quran nor the Hadiths or Sunnah of their Prophet has ever mentioned Palestine as belonging to the Arabs or to the Muslims. In fact, the Quran stated very clearly that God has given the land to the children of Israel. See Surah Al-Ankabut 29, verse 47. God did not give the Arab Muslims the land of Israel, but it had been robbed at the tip of their swords and spears. It had been the same way with the Philistines, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, the Byzantines, the Muslims, the Crusaders, the Egyptian Mamluks, the Fatimids, the Ottoman Turks, and the British. In 1967, The Jews were surrounded by 1 million Arab soldiers from Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. They were outnumbered by 12 to 1. The Arabs were supported by 30 nations. They had been trained and assisted by the top military officials of Russia and joined by 30 South Korean pilots. On the second day, they were joined by the Pakistani Air Force and aircraft from Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Israel was left alone to face the combined might of Jew hostility. The whole world kept watching and expecting to see the destruction of the tiny state of Israel and the annihilation of the Jews. In 6 days, Israel defeated the combined Arab and Muslim armies and destroyed their planes before they took off. The Six-Day War, 1967. How could such a small group of hated people achieve such a victory if God did not stand with them? Psalm chapter 129 answers that question. No matter how nations who hate Israel cannot prevail. The United Nations issued over 370 resolutions condemning Israel for defending itself against the never-ending rocket attacks of the Palestinians but were ominously silent against Palestinian aggression. Iran vowed to wipe Israel from the world map and the UN issued no condemnation to such threat. It is true that God scattered his chosen nation, the children of Israel, all over the world because of their sins. In the 1st century, they committed a huge sin by rejecting their Messiah and King, the Lord Jesus Christ, and delivered him to the Romans to crucify and kill him. For that reason, God rejected him and hardened their hearts. But, the Bible said, their rejection was temporary and not final. And their hardness is partial. Their temporary rejection and partial hardness opened the door for the Gentiles to come in and be grafted in the rich root of Israel. Their rejection will continue until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. When the elect among the Gentiles come in, God will remove the hardness of the Jews, and then all Israel will be saved. The Apostle Paul said to his Christian brethren at Rome, "For I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation. That a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, and so all Israel will be saved. Just as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will remove ungodliness from Jacob." Romans chapter 11, verses 25 to 26. Many Christians ask, who the chosen people are after God has partially rejected the children of Israel and put him to sleep. Are there two chosen peoples of God, one Israel and one the Christians? The answer to this question, simply put, there is only one chosen people of God, the elect. When a Christian becomes a true believer, he has converted to Orthodox Judaism, and when a Jew accepts Christ, he has become a complete Jew. Those who maintain a distinction between Israel and the Church, replacing the latter with the former, have often fallen in anti-Semitism and unjustly persecuted the Jews. In the meantime, God allowed other nations to persecute his chosen nation, the Jews. But it pained God to see his chosen nation being persecuted. He also punished those nations who transgressed against his chosen people. God allowed Islam to invade and possess the lands of the Christians of the Middle East, Anatolia, North Africa. And its sword reached up to Spain. Muslim mujahideen killed 60 million Christians and occupied 2/3 of the Christian world. Until today, Muslims have the upper hand in those former Christian countries. Through the Black Plague, 1/4 of Europe perished. During the 30-year War of Religions, between the Catholics and Protestants, 1/5 of Europe perished. Germany's population was reduced from 30 million to 13 million. In World War I, 25 million Europeans were killed, and in World War II another 55 million people died. Joseph Stalin killed 20 million Russians. Europe was plagued by all kinds of atheistic ideas, and today many of the Europeans don't believe in God. As soon as the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity and began to persecute the Jews, the Church joined Rome in persecuting the chosen people too. Shortly after that, the Roman Empire was destroyed by the barbarian tribes in 476. Europe descended into the Dark Ages, which plagued it for over 1,000 years. The Church replaced the Roman Empire, and through Charlemagne, it created its own Holy Roman Empire. The Pope of Rome became the ruler of the world. The devil corrupted the Roman Catholic Church and rendered it beyond reformation. The light of the Reformation shone for a while until its main founder, Martin Luther, began to call for the persecution and destruction of the Jews. By the way, the Reformers failed in reforming the Roman Catholic Church. They just split and formed their different churches, which became known as the Protestant churches. In his dirty little book, On the Jews and Their Lies, Martin Luther writes, "My advice. As I said earlier, first, that their synagogues be burned down, and that all who are able to toss sulfur and pitch, it would be good if someone could also throw in some hellfire. Second, that all their books, their prayer books, their Talmudic writings, also the entire Bible be taken from them, not leaving them one leaf, and that these be preserved for those who may be converted. Third, that they were forbidden on pain of death to praise God, to give thanks, to pray, and to teach publicly among us and in our country. Fourth, that they were forbidden to utter the name of God within our hearing. For we cannot with a good conscience listen to this or tolerate it. He who hears this name, God, from a Jew must inform the authorities, or else throw sow dung at him when he sees him and chase him away. But what will happen even if we do burn down the Jews' synagogues and forbid them publicly to praise God, to pray, to teach, to utter God's name? They will still keep doing it in secret. If we know that they are doing this in secret, it is the same as if they were doing it publicly. For our knowledge of their secret doings and our toleration of them implies that they are not secret after all, and thus our conscience is encumbered with it before God. If this does not help, we must drive them out like mad dogs." In an article entitled, Martin Luther's Dirty Little Book, Jim Walker states, "On the Jews and Their Lies, Luther took Jewish hatred to a new level when he proposed setting fire to their synagogues and schools, taking them away from their homes, forbidding prayer and teaching or the utterance of God's name. Luther wanted to be rid of them and requested that the government and ministers deal with the problem. He requested pastors and preachers to follow his example of issuing warnings against the Jews. He goes so far as to claim that we are at fault in not slaying them for avenging the death of Jesus Christ. Hitler's Nazi government in the 1930s and 1940s fit Luther's desires to a T. Truly, if you want to understand the history of the world and interpret it properly, look at the children of Israel. In the beginning, the Reformers interpreted the Bible's prophecies literally. But when they came to prophecies about the future of Israel, they went back on the error of the Roman Catholic Church and started to interpret them allegorically. They too took Israel to mean the Church, and the Jews became the Christians, who erroneously called the New Israelites. Once again, the abominable replacement theology had crept back into the Reformation churches. Wherefore, the Roman Catholic Church once again gained the upper hand. In the 30 Years' War of Religions that followed, the watchdogs of the Pope, the Jesuits, and his knights wreaked havoc all over the continent. Some of the true Christians, the Puritans and Pilgrims, had to emigrate to the New World to escape the turmoil of the religious persecution and its attendant wars in Europe. After the signing of the Peace Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, the Council created the concept of religious tolerance where everyone was allowed to worship whatever god he liked, even the devil. This lenient policy toward the sharp distinction between the true religion from the false religion, the right doctrine from the wrong doctrine, and the real God from the false God, has led to secularism which lasted until the present time. Today, under religious freedom, secular education outlawed the teachings of Christianity in public schools. And the Lord Prayer is banned in schools and all courts of law, and Satan worshippers worship the devil openly and freely in their satanic churches. The Baphomet statue of Satan, a goat-headed figure with horns, wings, and a long beard, was unveiled in Detroit, Michigan under the cheering of hundreds of Satan worshippers of the New York-based Temple of Satan, who decided to erect it next to a Ten Commandments monument in Arkansas. Quoting Christian News Network, July 27, 2015. Many popular American singers on the stage tore the pages of the Holy Bible into pieces and openly worshipped Satan along with hundreds of thousands of their youth fans. Today, Europe became a safe haven for every kind of man-made religion. Millions upon millions of the followers of Eastern religions flock to Europe. Islamic terrorist groups are recruiting youth from every city of Europe. After the signing of the Peace Treaty of Westphalia, the devil himself had masqueraded as an angel of light as Europe plunged into a new kind of spiritual darkness, falsely called the Age of Enlightenment. What kind of enlightenment led to the bloody French Revolution, which crowned a prostitute woman as the goddess of reason? Which kind of revolution installed Napoleon Bonaparte as the new emperor of Europe? What kind of enlightenment led Europe to forsake God and descend into the spiritual darkness of Gnosticism and atheism that plagued the white continent until today? Perhaps the most classical example of the anti-Semitism was the legend of the Wandering Jew, also called the Eternal Jew. This legend was produced in thousands of works of literature in all countries of Europe, from Russia to Spain. It had been believed by millions as a true story. The Wandering Jew or the Eternal Jew was a medieval legend about a Jew who refused to give Jesus water or did not allow him to lean on his wall, while Christ was carrying his cross. On his way to the Golgotha, as punishment for his sin, this Jew was condemned by God to eternal restless wandering and suffering until the second return of Christ. Everyone wishes to have a long life, but happy long life. But this Jew was condemned to a long life of continuous suffering and continuous restless wandering. This legend appeared in European literature and folklore tales in many different versions. Many names and identifications were attributed to this wandering eternal Jew. He was known as Ahasuerus or Buttigius. He was identified as a shoemaker in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. He was also identified as a shadow, the Antichrist, or a beggar. Like Cain who killed his brother Abel or the sacred executioner who crucified Jesus. Many religious leaders and ordinary people claimed to have sighted Ahasuerus from far or had a real encounter with him. He walks in lonely places, such as forests, valleys, mountains, deserts, highways, haunted places, and the like. He appears to people as a ghost, a shadow, an old man, and warns them about the sin of unbelief. An American bishop visited Europe and claimed to have seen the Eternal Jew, and the legend traveled with him to the United States of America. In European folk belief associated the appearance of Ahasuerus in a certain locality with wars, plagues, and ultimately with the Last Judgment and the Second Coming of Christ. There were no morals behind this legend except that it was a creation of a fictional figure about antisemitism against the Jews. It depicted the Jews as cursed, condemned, and wandering people on earth. This belief persisted until the present time. In 1902–1903, in Russia, a forged document appeared, which was called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It included a Jewish conspiracy supposedly drafted by the Elders of Zion, teaching Jews everywhere how to take over the world, take control of the media and the financial institutions, change the traditional social order, etc. It was the first known conspiracy theory in the world. The first Russian investigation concluded that the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion first appeared in Paris in anti-Semitic circles around 1897 to 1898. The same document was later reproduced by the secret police of France and used against the French Jews. It had been translated in all major European languages and used in many Western cities as anti-Semitic means to persecute Jews and expel them from many countries. A translation made by an Arab Christian appeared in Cairo in 1927, this time as a book. The first translation by an Arab Muslim was also published in Cairo, but only in 1951. The culmination of anti-Semitism reached its height in Nazi Germany under the greatest tyrant of human history, Adolf Hitler. He said in his book, Mein Kampf, "The personification of the devil as the symbol of all evil assumes the living shape of the Jew. And so, he, the Jew, advances on his fatal road until another force comes forth to oppose him. And in a mighty struggle hurls the heaven-stormer back to Lucifer. Germany is today the next great war aim of Bolshevism. It requires all the force of a young missionary idea to raise our people up again, to free them from the snares of this international serpent, Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf." The tyrant Hitler continued to write, "Hence today I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator, by defending myself against the Jew. I am fighting for the work of the Lord." Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf. Hitler wrote his book when he was in prison. When he came to power he attempted to destroy an entire human race, the Jews. He was influenced by anti-Semitism which was already 2,000-year-old. The European antisemitism was like a snowball that kept rolling for centuries until it reached its zenith in the Nazi Germany Holocaust, which led to the mass murder or genocide of 6 million Jews, of whom 1.5 million Jewish children and 2 million Jewish women. A network of over 40,000 facilities in Germany and German-occupied territories were used to concentrate, hold, and kill the Jews. Hitler thought that he was acting according to the will of God. Today, the new Nazi Germany is Iran, and the new Hitler and his Nazis are the Iranian leaders who vowed to wipe Israel from the world's map. This also is included in the second article of the Constitution of the Palestinian terrorist group of Hamas. They want to drive all the Jews into the Mediterranean Sea. Their prophet Muhammad promised them that the last hour will not come until Muslims will kill all the Jews of the world. Abu Huraira reported Allah's Messenger, may peace be upon him, as saying, "The last hour would not come unless the Muslims will fight against the Jews and the Muslims would kill them until the Jews would hide behind a stone or a tree. Then the tree or stone would say, 'Muslim, O the servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him.' But the tree Gharqad would not say that, because it is the tree of the Jews." Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 41. Hadith number 6985. Antisemitism in Islam. The Quran and Hadiths of Prophet Muhammad from A to Z without exaggeration are anti-Semitic religious texts. You cannot be a true Muslim if you do not hate the Jews and curse them day and night and strive hard to kill them. According to the teachings of Islam, the Jews are debased, cursed, anathematized forever by God, and so they can never repent and be forgiven. They are cheats and traitors, defiant and stubborn, prophet killers, liars who falsify the scripture and take bribes. Ritually unclean infidels, with a foul odor emanating from them. In classical Islam, the image of the Jew is derogatory and malevolent. The Quran and Hadith state that some Jews are cursed by God and turned into apes, pigs, and rats. And well ye knew those amongst you, children of Israel, who transgressed in the matter of the Sabbath. We said to them, Be ye apes, despised and rejected. Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 65. Say, shall I inform you of what is worse than that as penalty from Allah? It is that of those, the Jews, whom Allah has cursed and with whom he became angry and made of them apes and pigs and slaves of Taghut, Satan. Those are worse in position and further astray from the sound way. Quran, Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 60. The Prophet Muhammad said, a group of Israelites was lost. Nobody knows what they did. But I do not see them except that they were cursed and changed into rats. Sahih al-Bukhari. Hadith number 4. Antisemitism in Islam is a vast topic. It needs a separate book to expose it in detail. Since this book focuses on antisemitism among Christians, in other future writings we may discuss the verses of the Quran and the Hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which incite hatred and command the killing of the people of the book, Jews and Christians. Nevertheless, the suffering and persecution of the Jews cannot be fully revealed if we do not state briefly the Islamic antisemitism. Muslim antisemitism or Islamic hatred toward the people of the book, Jews and Christians. To discuss it thoroughly needs a separate book. However, to complete this account I have selected a few incidents of antisemitism which mainly happened during the late part of the 19th century and the 20th century. The Caliph of Baghdad, al-Muqtadi, 1075–1094, had given the power to his vizier, Abu Shuja, who imposed that each male Jew should wear a yellow badge on his headgear. This was one distinctive sign on the head and the other was on the neck, a piece of lead of the weight of a silver dinar hanging around the neck of every Jew and inscribed with the word dhimmi to signify that the Jew had to pay jizya. Jews also had to wear girdles around their waists. Abu Shuja further imposed two signs on Jewish women. They had to wear black and red shoes. And each woman had to have a small brass bell on her neck or shoe, which would tinkle and thus announce the separation of Jewish women from Muslim women. He also assigned cruel Muslim men to spy upon Jewish women, in order to oppress them with all kinds of curses, humiliation, and spite. The Muslim population used to mock all the Jews. And the mob and their children used to beat up the Jews in all the streets of Baghdad. When a Jew died, who had not paid up the jizya to the full and was in debt for a small or large amount, the Muslims did not permit burial until the jizya was paid. If the deceased left nothing of value, the Muslims would demand that other Jews should, with their own money, meet the debt owed by the deceased in jizya, otherwise they would threaten to burn the body of the dead Jew. In Muslim Moorish Spain, Ibn Hazm and Abu Ishaq focused their anti-Jewish writings on the latter allegation. This was also the chief motivation behind the 1066 Granada massacre. When more than 1,500 Jewish families, numbering 4,000 persons, fell in one day, and in Fez in 1033, when 6,000 Jews were killed. There were further massacres in Fez in 1276 and 1465. In the Zaydiyya Imamate of Yemen, Jews were also singled out for discrimination in the 17th century, which culminated in the general expulsion of all Jews from places in Yemen to the arid coastal plains of Tihama, later known as the Mawza exile. The Damascus affair occurred in 1840 when a French monk and his servant disappeared in Damascus. Immediately following, a charge of religious ritual murder was brought against many Jews in the city, including children, who were tortured. The consuls of England, France, and Germany, as well as Ottoman authorities, Christians, and Muslims all played a great role in this affair. Following the Damascus affair, pogroms of Jews spread through the Middle East and North Africa. Pogroms occurred repeatedly in many Muslim big cities such as Aleppo, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Port Said, Damanhur, Istanbul, Büyükdere, Kuzguncuk, Ayub, Edirne, and Izmir. There was a massacre of Jews in Baghdad in 1828, at yet another in Barfurush in 1867. In a recent article, entitled, "Is It Time for the Jews to Leave Europe?" April 2015, The American Jew. Jeffrey Goldberg wrote, "The Church blamed the Jews for killing Jesus. Voltaire blamed the Jews for inventing Christianity. In the febrile minds of anti-Semites, Jews were usurers and well poisoners and spreaders of disease. Violence against Jews in Western Europe today, according to those who track it, appears to come mainly from Muslims who in France, the epicenter of Europe's Jewish crisis, outnumber Jews 10 to 1. France's 475,000 Jews represent less than 1% of the country's population. Yet, last year, according to the French Interior Ministry, 51% of all racist attacks targeted Jews. 3/4 of France's Jews are Sephardim, chased from Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia in the 1950s and 1960s. The statistics in other countries, including Great Britain, are similarly dismal. In 2014, Jews in Europe were murdered, raped, beaten, stalked, harassed, spat on, and insulted for being Jewish. In Germany, the German word Seil Juif, which means dirty Jew, rang in the streets, as did death to the Jews, and Jews to the gas. One Danish imam, Abu Bilal Ismail, became famous last year for urging worshippers in a Berlin mosque to kill Jews. He said, "Count them and kill 'em to the very last one. Don't spare a single one of them." Another man, of Sudanese background, explained that the Quran itself warns Muslims to fear double-crossing by Jews. They killed the prophets and tried to poison the Prophet Muhammad. He said the demonstrators chanted, "Hamas Hamas, Jews to the gas," at rallies in Germany last year. According to the Community Security Trust, 2014 saw the highest number of anti-Semitic incidents in the United Kingdom, which is home to 300,000 Jews. Since the organization began its monitoring efforts, in 1984, it recorded 1,168 anti-Semitic incidents. This is more than double the number of incidents in 2013 and exceeds the previous record from 2009, of 931 incidents. Today, the world's 14 million or so Jews are found mainly in two places, Israel and the United States. Israel has the largest Jewish population, slightly more than 6 million. The US is home to about 5.7 million. Europe, including Russia, has a Jewish population of roughly 1.4 million. There are about 1 million Jews scattered across the rest of the world, including significant communities in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, Australia, and Canada. The Jews, the ever-dying people, in the words of the late historian Simon Rawidowicz, have a gift for self-perpetuation. All Jewish stories come to an end, the German Jewish novelist Maxim Biller told me recently, but then they just keep going. To all the Jews of France, all the Jews of Europe. I would like to say that Israel is not just the place in whose direction you pray. The State of Israel is your home, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu said after the kosher market attack in Paris, on January 9, 2015. In 2002, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of a Lebanese terrorist group called Hezbollah, reportedly said in a speech that if the Jews all gather in Israel, it will save us the trouble of going after them worldwide. He wanted all Jews of the world to come to Israel so that his terrorists and other Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab terrorists could annihilate them all. The argument for Israel is one that has been made since Theodor Herzl witnessed the humiliation of Alfred Dreyfus in France. Theodor Herzl said Jews living in their own country are at least masters of their own fate. No more relying on the fleeting kindness of Christian princes or the caprice of Ottoman viziers. Or, for that matter, on the continued embrace of a French prime minister or the uncertain mercies of the National Front. Israel's success, or failure, is largely in Jewish hands. The Arabs got 500 times the share of the Promised Land and still, they complain that Israel got too much. In fact, in 1946, about 80% of Palestine, the Promised Land, was granted independence and renamed Jordan. Jordan was part of Palestine, today Israel, but the British created a new country and named it Transjordan. The people of that land went to their beds as Palestinians and woke up Jordanians. And the day the Palestinian Arabs seek peaceful coexistence is the day they will have a second Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. This is called the two-state solution. Israel complains about it because Arabs have been trying to do it for so long and keep claiming that this is their goal. The Arabs want nothing except total annihilation of the Jews and complete possession of their promised land, from the river to the sea, River Euphrates to the Red Sea. Thousands but millions of public anti-Semitic statements made by Arab political and religious leaders reveal the main goal of each and every Arab man. Here is just a randomly selected speck from archives of the world of gross hatred. Kill the Jews wherever you find them. This pleases God, history, and religion. Hajj Amin al-Husseini, Mufti of Jerusalem. Radio Berlin, March 1, 1944. Quoted in Robert Wistrich, Muslim Antisemitism, A Clear and Present Danger, American Jewish Committee, 2002, page 47. This will be a war of extermination and a momentous massacre which will be spoken of like the Tartar Massacre or the Crusader Wars. Azam Pasha, Secretary-General of the Arab League. Akbar al-Yom. Egypt, October 11, 1947. Quoted in David Barnett and Ephraim Karsh, Azam's Genocidal Threat, Middle East Quarterly, Fall 2011. If the Jewish state becomes a fact, and this is realized by the Arab peoples, they will drive the Jews who live in their midst into the sea. Even if we are beaten now in Palestine, we will never submit. We will never accept the Jewish state. But for politics, the Egyptian army alone, or volunteers of the Muslim Brotherhood, could have destroyed the Jews. Hassan al-Banna, Muslim Brotherhood founder, New York Times, August 2, 1948. Israel, to the Arab world, is like cancer to the human body. And the only way of remedy is to uproot it just like cancer. Had we united in the year 1948, Israel would not have come into existence. Israel is a serious wound in the Arab world body. And we cannot endure the pain of this wound forever. We don't have the patience to see Israel remain to occupy part of Palestine for long. We Arabs total about 50 million. Why don't we sacrifice 10 million of our number to live in pride and self-respect? King Saud of Saudi Arabia, New York Times, January 10, 1954. Collective Arab military preparations. When they are completed, will constitute the ultimate practical means for the final liquidation of Israel. The Arab League Summit Declaration, January 1964, quoted in Avi Shlaim, The Iron Wall. Israel and the Arab World, Penguin, 2001, page 230. Our path to Palestine will not be covered with a red carpet or with yellow sand. Our path to Palestine will be covered with blood. In order that we may liberate Palestine, the Arab nation must unite. The Arab armies must unite, and a unified plan of action must be established. Gamal Abdel Nasser, pre-election speech 1965, quoted in Ephraim Karsh, Islamic Imperialism, A History. Yale University Press, 2007, page number 162. The day on which the Arab hope for the return of the refugees to Palestine is realized will be the day of Israel's extermination. Abdullah al-Yafeh. Lebanese Prime Minister, al-Hayat, April 29, 1966. Quoted in Harris Schönberg, A Mandate for Terror, The United Nations and the Palestinian PLO, Shapolsky Books, 1989, page number 239. Strike the enemy's settlements, turn them into dust, pave the Arab roads with the skulls of Jews. Hafez Assad, the former Syrian president and father of the current president, Bashar Assad. Michael Oren, 6 Days War, Oxford University Press, 2002, page 293. We shall never stop until we can go back home, and Israel is destroyed. The goal of our struggle is the end of Israel. And there can be no compromises or mediations. The goal of this violence is the elimination of Zionism from Palestine in all its political, economic, and military aspects. We don't want peace. We want victory. Peace for us means Israel's destruction and nothing else. Yasser Arafat, PLO chairman, Washington Post, March 29, 1970. It is an incontrovertible fact that Palestine is Arab Islamic and that the Jews are the scum of humanity that gathered from the four corners of the earth and conquered our land. Treachery flows in their blood. As the Quran testifies, Salah Khalaf, also called Abu Iyad, al-Kabas, November 28, 1989, quoted in Barry Rubin, Revolution Until Victory, The Politics and History of the PLO. Harvard University Press, 1994, page number 180. The so-called State of Israel was one of the consequences of World War II and should disappear as the Berlin Wall has along with the other consequences of that war. Yasser Arafat. Joint statement with Colonel Gaddafi, former president of Libya. BBC Summary of World Broadcasts, January 8, 1990. You Germans have great expertise in the killing of Jews with gas. This interests us in the same way. How can this knowledge be used to destroy Israel? General Aymer al-Sadi, Iraqi chemical weapons commander. Kenneth Timmerman, The Death Lobby, Bantam Books. 1992, page 81. It is an open war until the elimination of Israel and until the death of the last Jew on earth. Hezbollah statement, issued under Islamic Jihad alias United Press International. March 24, 1992. The criminals, the terrorists, are the Jews. They are the ones who must be butchered and killed, as Allah, the Almighty said. Fight them. Allah will torture them at your hands. And will humiliate them and will help you to overcome them. Have no mercy on the Jews, no matter where they are, in any country. Fight them, wherever you are. Wherever you meet them. Kill him. Dr. Ahmed Abu Halabia, Palestinian Authority cleric, Palestinian Authority Television, October 13, 2000. Thanks to Hitler, of blessed memory, who had avenged in advance against the vilest criminals on the face of the earth. Although we do have a complaint against him, for his revenge on him was not enough, the Egyptian government newspaper, Al-Akhbar, Egypt. April 18, 2001. Repeated on April 25, 2001. No one can ask why Hitler punished the Jews. Did Hitler attack the Jews or did their crime deserves even more? Egyptian government newspaper, Al-Akhbar, Egypt, May 27. 2001. We are ambushing the Israelis and cheating them. If we agree to declare our state over what is now 22% of Palestine, meaning the West Bank and Gaza. Our ultimate goal is the liberation of all historic Palestine from the river to the sea. We distinguish the strategic, long-term goals from the political phased goals, which we are compelled to temporarily accept due to international pressure. Faisal Husseini, PLO strategist, Al-Arabi, Egypt, June 24, 2001, Jerusalem Report, July 30, 2001. All spears should be directed at the Jews, at the enemies of Allah, the nation that was cursed in Allah's book, the Quran. Allah has described them as apes and pigs. We blow them up in Hadera. We blow them up in Tel Aviv and in Netanya, until the Jew will hide behind a stone or a tree, and the stone or the tree will say, O Muslim, O servant of Allah, a Jew is hiding behind me. Come kill him. Sheikh Ibrahim Mahdi, Palestinian Authority cleric, Palestinian Authority Television, August 3, 2001. We are convinced that our dead goes to paradise, while the dead of the Jews goes to hell. O Allah, show the Jews a black day. O Allah, annihilate the Jews and their supporters. O Allah, raise the flag of jihad across the land. Sheikh Ibrahim Mahdi, Palestinian Authority cleric, Palestinian Authority Television, April 12, 2002. The Jews are accursed in heaven and on earth. They are accursed from the day the human race was created and from the day their mothers bore them. These accursed ones are a catastrophe for the human race. They are the virus of the generation. Doomed to a life of humiliation and wretchedness, they are the plague of the generation and the bacterium of all time. Thus, the Jews are accursed, the Jews of our time. Those who preceded them and those who will come after them, if any Jews come after them. With regard to the fraud of the Holocaust, I personally and in light of this imaginary tale, complain to Hitler, even saying to him from the bottom of my heart, if only you had done it, brother. If only it had really happened so that the world could sigh in relief. Egyptian government newspaper, Al-Akhbar, Egypt, April 29, 2002. The Jews are a virus resembling AIDS, from which the entire world suffers. The Jews were behind all the civil strife in this world. The Jews are behind the suffering of the nations. The day will come when we will rule Britain and the entire world, except for the Jews. The Jews will not enjoy a life of tranquility under our rule, because they are treacherous by nature, as they have been throughout history. The stones and trees will want the Muslims to finish off every Jew. Sheikh Ibrahim Mudaris, Palestinian Authority cleric, Palestinian Authority Television, May 13, 2005. Allah's promise and the Prophet's prophecy of our victory in Palestine over the Jews and over the oppressive Zionists have begun to come true. Before Israel dies, it must be humiliated and degraded. Allah willing, Before they die, they will experience humiliation and degradation every day. Allah willing, we will make them lose their eyesight. We will make them lose their brains. Khalid Mashal, Hamas leader, Al Jazeera TV, February 3, 2006. A 10th grade textbook in Syria. The aggressive and evil disposition rooted in the Jewish personality. The logic of true justice obligates one verdict on him from which there is no escape, that their criminal intentions be turned against them with their extermination. Yasser Arafat, 1980. Peace for us means the destruction of Israel. We are preparing for an all-out war, a war which will last for generations. The armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon are poised on the borders of Israel to face the challenge, while standing behind us are the armies of Iraq, Algeria, Kuwait, Sudan, and the whole Arab nation. This act will astound the world. Today they will know that the Arabs are arranged for battle. The critical hour has arrived. We have reached the stage of serious action and not declarations. Egyptian President, Jamal Abdel Nasser, May 30, 1967, after signing a defense pact with Jordan's King Hussein. It is important to mention briefly the affair of Dreyfus in order to show how the Jews were unfairly hated and unjustly tried in Europe. Alfred Dreyfus was a French Jew serving as a captain in the French army. In 1894, he was condemned by a French court-martial as a traitor who allegedly passed military secrets information to the Germans through their embassy in Paris. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and deported to Devil's Island. In 1896, new evidence surfaced indicating that the real culprit and traitor was a French major called Ferdinand Walsin Esterhazy. Even then, due to the anti-Semitic riots erupting in 10 major French cities, which led to the murder of thousands of Jews, the French court could neither acquit Dreyfus nor condemn Major Esterhazy. In 1898, Major Ferdinand Walsin Esterhazy was acquitted to the cheers of nationalists, afterward shaving his moustache and fleeing France. The scandalous trial led Émile Zola to publish his J'accuse. Zola addressed President of France Félix Faure and accused the government of anti-Semitism and the unlawful jailing of Alfred Dreyfus. Zola also was condemned and charged with libel. But he fled to England to avoid imprisonment. Notwithstanding, the open letter of Zola popularized the Dreyfus affair, which caused many outsiders to write extensively about it and demand justice. The French Supreme Court annulled the first ruling against Dreyfus and requested a new trial to be held. In 1899, a new court-martial investigated the matter and against all odds once again condemned Dreyfus with 10 years under hard labor. In order to pacify and quell the anti-Semitic riots which erupted in 20 cities and at the same stroke, meet the demands of the outcry of the outside world for justice, President Émile Loubet granted a presidential pardon to Dreyfus. The Dreyfus affair engendered numerous anti-Semitic demonstrations, which in turn affected the emotions within the Jewish communities of Central and Western Europe. These demonstrations had an impact on the international movement of Zionism by persuading one of its founding fathers, Theodor Herzl, that the Jews must remove themselves from Europe and found their own state. But since 1898, the regathering of the chosen people of God began. The Jews returned from Russia, from all European countries, from Iraq, Yemen, North Africa, and many other Arab countries. In 1948, the United Nations voted in the favor of the Jewish state. Their punishment for rejecting their king and crucifying him is over. The Lord Jesus says, "And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations." And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Luke chapter 21, verse 24. The times of the Gentiles here means the period their promised land would be occupied by foreigners. 40 nations of the Gentiles occupied the promised land. Since 1948, the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled, and the chosen people got their land back. No power on earth can uproot them again. The regathering of God's chosen people began in 1898, and on August 15, 1948, the United Nations declared Israel as a sovereign state. On the following day, Arab armies of 4 countries, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and Syria invaded Israel's border and attempted to destroy the one-day-old country. Israel struck first and defeated them all. Yet, many other Arab attacks followed until the Arab hostility reached its peak in the Six-Day War of 1967, when Israel humiliated the Arabs' pride and rendered them decisive and final defeat. When the Arabs came to grapple with the understanding that Israel is not likely to be defeated, they accepted the American solution of Camp David. That solution is just a pseudo-peace treaty in papers, but in real life the Arabs plot day and night against the State of Israel. They are openly supporting all the Islamic terrorist groups which vow to annihilate the Jews and their state, such as Hamas, Hezbollah, Kataib al-Aqsa, Muslim Brotherhood, Iran, Ansar Allah in Yemen, and the like of them. While America is trying to create the so-called two-state solution, many European leaders turned their backs on the Jewish state and begin openly to side with the Muslim Palestinians. The two-state solution is against the will of God. He has given the entire promised land to the children of Israel. If the Jews give 1 foot of territory to the Arabs, they go against the promise of God. God has given the land to the Jews as an everlasting inheritance. See Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 12, chapter 17, verses 7 to 8, chapter 28, verse 13, chapter 35, verses 11 to 12, Exodus chapter 23, verse 31, Psalm chapter 105, verses 8 to 11. The Bible also is full of prophecies, which clearly stated that God will gather the Jews from all over the world and he will bring them to their homeland, which he has done. Read Isaiah chapter 43, verses 5 to 6, Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 27 to 29, chapter 37, verses 21 to 27, Amos chapter 9, verses 13 to 15, Jeremiah 16, verses 14 to 15, chapter 31. The Palestinians can stay in the land without being harassed or molested, but they must be considered foreigners. God has commanded the Jews to love the foreigner and treat him as a native born. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. The Book of Leviticus chapter 19, verse 34. The Abrahamic Covenant. The Bible said, Jehovah God has called Abraham and said to him, "And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." The Book of Genesis chapter 12. Verses 2 to 3. The blessings in these 2 verses are promised to those who bless the Jews, the great nation that came from Abraham, and the curses to those who curse the Jews. I believe that all Christians who hate the Jews and refuse to support Israel are going against God's will and incurring the curses of Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. In fact, to hate the Jews is equal to hating God. God has blessed the United States of America and made it the greatest country in the world because it is supporting Israel. And when the Jews got persecuted and killed in Europe, America took them in and gave them safe refuge. Today, the center of all world's activities is the nation of Israel. The Jewish nation was attempted destruction by Nazi Germany, Haman of Persia, see the Book of Esther, and Pharaoh of Egypt, see the Book of Exodus. They were dispersed by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and by the Romans in 70 and 134 AD, but still, they survived and returned. 3 times, they had been out of their promised land, and 3 times they returned to it. Once a Jew was told, "You are the chosen people," he said, "I wish he chose somebody else." This is because no other people were so persecuted as the Jews. Until 2000, there are 663 Nobel Prize winners, 140 of them are Jews. The global Jewish population is approximately 14 million, or about 0.02% of the world's population. As of 2013, 193 Nobel Prize winners are Jews. The global Islamic population is approximately 1.2 billion, or roughly 20% of the world's population. As of 2013, 14 Nobel Prize recipients are Muslims. Times magazine put the 20 top people in the world. 60% of them are Jews. 30% of the Supreme Court in America are Jews. 13% of law colleges professors in America are Jews. Of college age Jews, 80% are in college. 60% of all top Hollywood positions are held by Jews. 40% of New York's lawyers are Jews. 10% of U.S. colleges professors are Jews. 23% of the wealthiest people in America are Jews. 20% of the wealthiest people in Canada are Jews. Mark Twain once said, "All things are mortal except the Jew." Frederick the Great of Russia asked his court chaplain to prove the inerrancy of the Bible. He said, "One word, sir, Israel." By watching the Jews, you can see what God is doing. 64 of the Bible's 66 books were written by Jews except for 2 which were written by a single Gentile, Luke, the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts. We Christians hold in our hands a Jewish book. This is the nation that has given us the 10 Commandments, the finished law of God. The incarnation of God into humanity came to us through the descendant of David, a Jew, called Jesus Christ. Western civilization is shaped and developed through the Bible. No nation in the entire world has come remotely close to the Jewish nation. The beginning of this nation is in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. It is the foundation on which everything else is built. God called a barren man and a barren woman. Out of the dead womb of Sarah, he created this miracle nation. All Jews traced their origin to one single man, Abraham. For that reason, Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3 is called the Abrahamic covenant. God gave by an oath to Abraham this nation. God swears that this covenant will be done. In verse 1, he promised to give him a land, the land of Canaan. The present day the land of Israel. In verse 2, he promised him a son, Isaac, and that his son will found a great nation, the nation of Israel. In verse 3, he commanded him to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. Through his seed, the Lord Jesus Christ, the whole world is going to be blessed. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee. And make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed, The Book of Genesis chapter 12, verses 1–3. From this nation came the knowledge of God's law, redemption, Bible, and reality of life. This nation is blessed with an everlasting blessing, given a land forever, and became a vehicle for a universal blessing for the entire world. The Apostle Paul said, "For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable." Romans chapter 11, verse 29. Israel has never and will never be a cursed nation. To call the Jews a cursed people is blasphemy. To hate that nation is to hate God, and to love that nation is to love God.